Hi, my name is Susan Spitzer, and I'll be speaking today about coping with a debilitating chronic illness. Let's take the case study of Susan S., who just happens to be me, and that picture of me is very, very old. I was born in the age of Aquarius. I graduated from high school. I got married, and I went to college. My graduate studies were in experimental psychology, and I finished my master's degree at age 27 and my PhD a year after that. My training focused on conducting research on physiological responses to stress, mostly in how it applied to the field of medicine. I also received extensive training in how to analyze data produced from this type of research. My husband and I had our daughter during the time that I was completing a 3-year postdoctoral fellowship. My entire pregnancy was spent in front of a very big printer producing lots of statistical reports. The same university that trained me also hired me. From my mid-20s to mid-30s, I worked as an instructor of statistics and computer applications of statistics, while I continued my research on the mind-body connection in the field of medicine. I progressed up the lines at that university and loved going to work every morning and hanging out with my daughter during the afternoons. At the age of 44 years old, I got very sick and had to stop working. It turns out that I have a genetic disorder of the connective tissue system called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and because I had lost so much connective tissue between my head and neck, my brains were literally falling out of the base of my skull. The expression "your brains are in your butt" truly did apply to me. Because the droopy brain problem was much worse when upright, Susan S. has had to spend a lot of time in bed. In order to emphasize to not overlook the obvious, medical students are taught that when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. In the case of Susan S., however, and illnesses like Ehlers-Danlos, just the opposite applies. When you hear hoofbeats, think zebras, not horses. The obvious effect of losing connective tissue is its impact on the musculoskeletal system, such as frequent joint dislocations. But the impact can become overwhelming as it affects many more body systems. Back to the case of Susan S. In 2007, my family and I left South Florida and ended up on the shores of Durham, North Carolina. I was tucked into bed and for the next 7 years blogged about coping with chronic illness. During this time in bed, I also founded and facilitated a local support network of people with chronic illness. I put on programs with speakers and ran an open house where people would drop in to discuss their woes. I did this until I was physically unable to continue. About 10 years after first getting too sick for work, I was paroled from bed when I underwent a craniocervical fusion. I also had another 6 brain surgeries the following year, and the year after that I was diagnosed with a new complication from the Ehlers-Danlos called Derkham's disease. I said, when you hear hoofbeats, think zebras, not horses. Nobody knows why some people with Ehlers-Danlos get Derkham's disease, but there are some theories out there. Because it is so rare, it is not likely to receive research money needed to conduct good quality research. In short, benign tumors develop in the skin that produce pain themselves, as well as by pressing on nerves. It may eventually become life-threatening, but it certainly reduces quality of life. Throughout the entire brain drop ordeal, I was fortunate enough to enjoy recumbent cycling. Most of the time I did this in a rigid neck brace, but it was a way to enjoy the world without the neurological complications I would get when completely upright. At this time, pain from the tumors is preventing me from riding, but I am hopeful to be able to get back onto my bike again. Digital art has become a passion of mine for the past several years. It is something I can do from bed. I still have many complications from my genetic disorder, and focusing on my art helps to distract me from my pain. It has been a very successful coping strategy for me. There are two types of illnesses: acute illness and chronic illness. The acute illness will only last for a set period of time, whereas a chronic illness can last for a lifetime. With acute illness, when it's over, the sufferer recovers and moves on with life. But with chronic illness, even though there may be some periods of recovery or remission, relapse is fairly certain. Acute illness typically has minimal or temporary impact on life, whereas chronic illness requires major changes to lifestyle. Examples of acute and chronic illness could include, for acute illness, things like the common cold or stomach viruses or flu, and so on. For chronic illness, we have things such as multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, lupus, Alzheimer's, arthritis, and yes, of course, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Debilitating chronic illness can cause many losses and add new challenges to life. For instance, career, income, burden of medical costs, the inability to meet household responsibilities, loss of independence, friends and colleagues, relationships change, and simple things like going to the movies can become a challenge, and so on and so on. Let's take the case of Susan S. again. Part of her challenges included she had lost the ability to understand the written word. She had lost the ability to rely on her hands for many tasks due to dislocations and subluxations. She has the challenge of physical comfort. She has to deal with pain. Poor sexual functioning. That's truly a bummer. Her beloved biking is always tenable. It's never certain when she's going to be able to do that or lose it. Swimming has become difficult. There are many side effects to medications that make the situation even worse, and so on. Now, how we cope with our losses defines whether we succumb to illness versus survive illness, or even how we thrive in our changed life. Now, the case of Susan S. proposes 3 strategies for coping with debilitating chronic illness. Let's start out with coping strategy number 1. I have found that it's very important to change your expectations to meet your current abilities. An essay called The Spoon Theory very eloquently illustrates how to implement the coping strategy that we're talking about here, the changing expectations to meet your current abilities. It can be found on the internet, but I was able to pick up this one little video, and I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm only going to play a portion of it, and it starts out in a scene with two friends talking in a diner, and one of them has lupus, and the other friend asks what it's like to have lupus.
Most people start the day with an unlimited amount of possibilities and energy to do whatever they desire. I quickly grabbed every spoon on the table. Hell, I grabbed spoons off other tables. And I looked at her in the eyes and said, "Here you go. You have lupus." If I was in control of taking away the spoons, then she would know what it feels like to have someone or something else, in this case lupus, being in control. I asked her to count her spoons. She asked why, and I explained that when you're healthy, you expect to have a never-ending supply of spoons. But when you have to now plan your day, you need to know exactly how many spoons you're starting with. I asked her to list off the tasks of her day, including the most simple. I explained how each one would cost her a spoon. When she jumped right into getting ready for work as her first task of the morning, I cut her off and took away a spoon. No, you don't just get up. You have to crack open your eyes and then realize you're late. You didn't sleep well the night before. You have to crawl out of bed, and then you have to make yourself something to eat before you can do anything else, because if you don't, you can't take your medicine. And if you don't take your medicine, you might as well give up all your spoons for today and tomorrow too. I stopped her and broke down every task to show her how every little detail needs to be thought about. I then explained to her that she needed to choose the rest of her day wisely, since when your spoons are gone, they're gone. We went through the rest of the day, and she slowly learned that skipping lunch would cost her a spoon, as well as standing on a train or even typing at her computer too long. She was forced to make choices and think about things differently. I explained that some days were worse than others, and some days I have more spoons than most. But I can never make it go away, and I can't forget about it. I always have to think about it. I handed her a spoon I'd been holding in reserve. I said simply, "I've learned to live life with an extra spoon in my pocket, in reserve. You need to always be prepared."
The case of Susan S. has had to learn to partition her spoons out. And here's a short video, or a portion of a short video, that she made that has to deal with housekeeping in the face of dealing with a debilitating chronic illness.
Well, this is my typical bedroom mess. When I go through periods of time where I'm not feeling well, the bed never gets made, and so the sheets start popping off the bed, and I have this little table next to my bed. Well, I have my night table that gets overrun with stuff, and then I have like a computer table that gets overrun with stuff, and then I have the floor, my dressing table, and all that sort of stuff. and it just gets totally, everything gets thrown all over the place. It's actually been worse than this, but the thing is you may have heard the expression that you sort of wake up every morning with a certain number of spoons, and you can spend a spoon doing something, or for statisticians out there, a certain number of degrees of freedom, and then when you run out, there goes one of the pets, when you run out, that's all there is. So during these periods of time where I'm really not doing well, I'm very finicky over what I spend my energy doing. And then I try and make up for it afterwards without overdoing it and making myself really sick.
So, in conclusion, about coping strategy number 1, you can't give away what you don't have. Use your spoons wisely. That brings us to coping strategy number 2, managing changing relationships. And relationships do change in the face of a chronic illness. It's well known that long-term debilitating illnesses can lead to social isolation, and it takes a lot of effort to avoid this. Now, Susan S. views the world as being made up of 2 types of people. There are well people, who are called wellos, and they're on the left. And then there are sick people, who we'll call sickos, and they're on the right. A lot of times what happens is you'll get interchanges such as the wello saying, "Oh no, there's that sicko. I don't know what to say. Guess I'll walk the other way." And in response, the sicko is typically would think to himself, "Why did that wellow turn away from me? Maybe I did something offensive." Or you could have a scenario where the sicko thinks, "I wish that wellow wouldn't say such stupid things to me, like, 'How are you feeling?'" And the wellow thinks to himself, "I don't know what the sicko wants from me." Sometimes you can have situations where the sicko might say something to the wellow, such as, "I heard that everyone went out for dinner. Why didn't you guys call me like usual?" And the wellow responds with, "We figured you weren't up for our usual Sunday night dinner." Feeling the rejection, the sicko then might think, "Those are mean people. I guess they don't want me around." The wellow might say, "Hi, sicko. I heard you've been sick. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you." And the sicko might say, "Can you help me set my table so I can make dinner for my family like I used to?" The wellow might think that would be so uncomfortable. These are typical exchanges that have occurred in the life of Susan S. Before you can effectively manage your changing relationships, we first need to identify your social network. I classify them as close family, close friends, general family, general friends, acquaintances, and strangers. But of course, this is not the only way to categorize your social network. Once you've identified your social network, you then need to determine how much energy you can afford to put into each one of those categories. All relationships need work, and this especially happens in the face of chronic illness. I would choose for myself with close family if I had a total of 20 spoons in one day, I would dedicate 40% of them, or 8 spoons, to working on the relationship with close family. I would then also allocate another 6 spoons to working with my close friends. General family, I allocate 2 spoons. General friends, I allocate 2 spoons. And acquaintances, I'll allocate 1 spoon. And in addition, I'll also allocate a spoon to strangers, because you never know what kind of a jewel a stranger has to offer you. Managing changing relationships is not just for the quality of life. It also affects your physical health. As a matter of fact, the relationship between social relationships, mental health, and physical health are all interrelated. Now, just a note on the impact of social situations on the body. There was a paper that was published by yours truly in the Journal of Psychosomatic Medicine in the early 1990s that looked at the impact of social situations on ambulatory blood pressure levels. It was an examination of 131 healthy adults who were both Caucasian and African American, both males and females, and around 35 years of age, although that varied a little bit. And their blood pressure levels when they were taken in the clinic or doctor's office was 127 over 83, which is pretty normal. So we feel that we have a pretty good sample of the population out there. And these people went out for a 24-hour period, had their blood pressures assessed automatically every 20 minutes during their normal activities, and they recorded what they were doing when they were doing it. The results were quite interesting when it came to looking at their social encounters. And initially, when the blood pressures were examined for when they were with family, they were pretty normal, 125 over 80. And this is when controlling for posture, talking, physical activity, movement, all of these factors were controlled for. And then, when still controlling for all of these factors, the blood pressures when these people were with strangers went up dramatically. It went up to about 138 over 87. So overall, the impact of the social situation when comparing families versus strangers had a dramatic impact on blood pressure, on the body, on the physiology, to the point of about 10 millimeters of mercury. Another article that was published more recently was actually examined uh, findings from already published experiments, such as the one that I just talked about. And this is a meta-analysis, which I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, is a very powerful way of looking at data. It combines information from experiments that were conducted all over the place. And they showed that social relations, when looking at it in terms of social support, whether people were being supported or whether they were doing the supporting, and social integration, meaning how intense the social relationships were. These were found to affect specific health behaviors, general health behaviors, and psychological processes such as self-esteem and depression and control. In turn, these behaviors and processes then affected physiological processes, such as what we just saw in the study earlier, where it affected the blood pressure, and those in turn affected the physical health in the long run. The conclusion about coping strategy number 2 is to strategically develop and maintain a social network for longevity and quality of life. Now, coping strategy number 3, think outside the box. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about pain management. Now, 90% of the time, when Susan S. is coping with pain, she's doing so by distracting herself. And a variety of activities can be used for distraction. And traits for successful distraction from pain include being no stressful decision making involved, avoiding emotional triggers. It should be monotonous. The activity should be familiar. It should be pleasant. And it should focus on non-painful areas of the body. Some of Susan S.'s favorite distracting activities include creating digital art, designing spreadsheets, flow charts, and slide presentations, which for most people is stressful, but it's a very familiar set of activities for Susan S. Reading Facebook news feeds, sometimes rereading old emails, and watching favorite Barbra Streisand concerts on video. Another technique for managing pain involves soothing. Now, soothing can be touch from a safe person, and I emphasize a safe person and also safe touch because a lot of times people who have undergone a lot of medical procedures might be sensitive to touch. So this can vary a lot by the individual. Another method of soothing, which is a really out-of-the-box method, is using some iPad apps. One of my favorite apps is here below, and you can see it's a display of a sunset on the beach. It gives audio sound with it, and you get to choose from different scenes. And sometimes I just find myself drifting off while I'm watching this. Now, another form of soothing can come from handling animals. This obviously is going to be different for different people. And I have 2 pet snakes, Samantha and Maxine, who are very good at nurturing me.
Hi guys, it's me, Susan S. again, here with Samantha again. I tried to wake up Maxine this time so that she could be in the movie, but Maxine was taking a nap, and when I tried to wake her up, she got angry with me and flicked me off. So I didn't want to bug her. So Samantha is much more docile. So I just woke her up, and she's like fine with everything. She says, "Want me to wake up and be with you?" That's fine. She'll rub my head if my head needs rubbing and relaxing. She'll rub the back of my neck if the back of my neck is hurting. She's been doing it since she was a real little baby, about that big. So she knows exactly what to do, and she's a real sweetie. And she's just one of my little creative ways that I use of coping. She helps me feel better physically when I'm hurting, and emotionally when I'm hurting. She's very calming to me. Maxine also does a similar job. but she's not as docile as Samantha is. Samantha has been doing this since she was a little bitty baby, so she's much more of a therapeutic animal than the other snake is that we have. Um,
Regardless of the type of animal, petting animals can be very therapeutic, not to mention very soothing. I mentioned earlier that I have a real passion for recumbent road cycling, but I did not mention that it has served very well for managing pain. The reasons why it has helped so much are only theoretical, but many of those theories are based on sound scientific research. For instance, the exercise helps to release endogenous opiates, which are the body's own natural pain medications. The rhythm of the pedaling has a very soothing effect. Being outside on that bike promotes connection with the outside world. It is also a very good distraction to focus away from the pain. And it also encourages related behaviors, which are very good distractions, such as shopping online for socks to go along with biking outfits. It can give a sense of purpose. Computers can be a great way to help with pain management and loneliness. The computer can bring the world to you. Although it's a difficult learning curve for some, it may be worth the energy expended to develop the proficiency needed in order to get the help that you could get on a computer. When mobility is a challenge, thinking outside the box can give you access to a computer. Here's an example of a great solution to mobility obstacles with this supine computer station. Unfortunately, it comes at using more creativity might even improve on some solutions that you've already come up with. Here's an example of a more economical solution to the mobility obstacle with the computer. I was able to build this in my home with a reclining chair that I already had and this desk that I was able to get off of Amazon.com. The total cost was, as you can see, much lower than what the other supine chair was. And it may not be as carefree as the first example, but for a couple of $100, I think it makes a lot of sense. Here's an even more economical solution to the mobility obstacle when using a laptop computer. The price for a table like this that can be used in bed, $18.99. iPads are also really great for pain management and loneliness. They also, like computers, help you join with the outside world through the internet. It's also a very easy learning curve. It's less cumbersome than dealing with a computer, and it also has fewer complications than a computer. I really like seeing people work with iPads and other types of tablets. I've also found iPad stands to be extremely useful in many situations. You can see a picture of me in bed here with my iPad stand in the background and my computer desk on my lap. When in bed for a long time, you have to surround yourself with your toys. But if you're going to surround yourself with your toys, think Velcro. Organize yourself with Velcro. You can see I built a little Velcro headboard behind my bed here, and then put Velcro pieces on the back of my remote controls, electrical devices, all kinds of things, phones. And that way, when I'm done with it, I take that remote control, I stick it up on the headboard behind me, and I know where it is, and then I just retrieve it when I'm ready to use it again. The coping strategy number 3 conclusion. Don't wait for someone else to come up with ideas to address obstacles. Rely on yourself to think outside the box. And again, the 3 coping strategies in a quick review. Change your expectations to meet current abilities. Manage changing relationships. And think outside of the box. And just a short closing thought. The mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. I thank you very much and wish you all the best of luck.